You're listening to Trending with Timmerie, offering an eternal perspective on today's hottest topics. National speaker Timmerie Millington has been a passionate advocate for life as long as she can remember, helping Gen X through Z answer the call to true feminism and authentic manhood. Timmerie holds a master's degree in biblical theology, and she covers this week's hottest stories from a Catholic worldview. You're listening to Trending with Timmerie.
Oh boy, do I have a surprise for all of you on today's show. Not only will you get to hear from our beloved Don Johnson to Trending, who we dearly miss, but also you will have the opportunity at the end of today's show to hear his story about how he met his beautiful wife, Kendra. Thanks for being with us, Don.
Hey, great to be here, Timmerie. Thanks for having me.
I have to tell you, listeners really do miss you. I received 2 messages this week just commenting who their favorite guests are.
Well, it's nice of my mom to send you a little note, and my wife, but no, that's cool. I do miss being on here. So, and in fact, I sometimes, when I'm traveling around or whatever, running into people, they're like, hey, we still listen to Timmerie, but we did love it when you were together. So I'm glad that, obviously I'm glad you're gaining audience all the time, but yes, it's always fun to be back here, Timmerie.
And let's be honest, Don, we always had our giggle sessions, like over something. I remember people message, I love when you and Don are laughing at something stupid going on in the culture.
Well, there's so much stupid going on. You see, it's hard. It's hard not to.
Okay, talking about stupid, this is full-on hate speech. I don't think there's any other way you can put it. Representative Brian Sims, have you seen these videos of him criticizing on social media? He doesn't give a darn what people think. How he's criticizing people who are praying for the abortion clinic.
This was one of those videos where it was hard to watch, and it was hard to watch like on several levels, and I found myself in the midst of it thinking, this is like an occasion for sin for me, because it's very difficult to not wish ill on this guy. And I you know what, I mean, when it comes to that point, a lot of times it's like, yeah, okay, this is stupid. I mean, there's so much ignorance, there's so much hate. I mean, the poor woman that he was just accosting, and then the young people later on. I mean, it's just, there's so much going on. But I found myself like, maybe I should hit pause here, because I mean, objectively, I think there's probably a lot of pain in this guy's life. There's a lot of, obviously a lot of ignorance, a lot of bad teaching, but I'm like getting angry in a bad way at this thing. And it's a very difficult video to watch.
Well, and here's the thing. There are 2 of them, I think within a month of each other. For those who have not seen the videos, I will tweet these out. Representative Brian Sims from Philadelphia goes on to Instagram or Snapchat Live something and ends up holding his phone up and is just standing in front of this Planned Parenthood, mocking on one occasion 2 or 3 teenagers, and he's actually offering $100 to one of his followers who could identify these teenagers and send addresses and so forth. He's saying, yeah, if you let me know, I'll donate also to Planned Parenthood. And then on a separate occasion, he goes on social media again, taking a video of himself, documenting himself, mocking a woman who is just quietly pacing back and forth, praying her rosary. To such an extent, there's nothing but hatred in this man's heart here.
It's amazing that he didn't get brought up on some charges. You think like you can't offer money to call people to the other people's houses, right? Like that was the thing. He's actually inciting action against these people in their homes. And so at that level, you're like, man, how is this guy a representative? I guess that's why. I mean, he's the one, I suppose, making the laws. But the poor lady who's praying, she's by herself, she's praying. She doesn't really interact with him at all. I was so proud of her, the way she did, just such a model of peace. And he finally got really right in her face with the phone, where she finally said, listen, you're going to need to back up here a little bit. But she did awesome. And, God works in mysterious ways. And the results of this story, though, Timmerie, actually turned out pretty well, I thought.
Yeah, it's been awesome. There have been rallies across the nation. The major one being actually this past Friday, 2 Fridays ago, if you're listening to this live, in Philadelphia. Matt Walsh was one of the key organizers, along with Abby Johnson, Lila Rose, even the mother of some of the teenagers who are being mocked by Representative Brian Sims from Philadelphia. I am just astonished that this type of behavior is in any way acceptable to Representative Brian Sims as what should be an upstanding model within our nation.
Well, that's the crazy thing. I think he actually thinks that he's doing the righteous thing here. That's what was sort of bizarre about the whole deal, right? Like, he kept saying, you should be ashamed, you should be ashamed. This is racist, and this is hurting women, and this is all. He's like throwing all of these moral charges against these peaceful protesters. And even the word protesting is a difficult one to me. I mean, they were just praying.
Right.
I get that's almost like a false label to put on them. They're praying in front of the abortion clinic. They're offering help to people who are arriving there, who obviously are in need of help. And he's just castigating her about how evil she is. And this, I mean, the sort of the flip, it's just like a calling, Scripture talks about calling evil good and good evil, and that's sort of at the heart of almost the sin that you can't get rid of. And that's what was on display here. It's like so opposite to label this woman unrighteous and saying she should be ashamed and how evil this was, when it's clearly him. Well, I guess not clearly to him, but I mean, clearly biblically and scripturally, like Christian-wise, right? I mean, objectively, he's on the wrong side of this thing, and just to be in a culture where you're so flipped is, it's disheartening. Ultimately, it's sad.
That's Don Johnson joining Trending with Timmerie today, and we're talking about Representative Brian Sims, and here's what stood out to me, Don. I had to go up and look at how old Representative Sims is. He's only 40, very young guy, and I sit here looking at this, and I think he's coming from a place of severe brokenness. I'm going to guess if he's willing to heckle an older woman like that, he, has a huge disrespect for women because he's also heckling young girls, but also he must have a poor relationship with his mother. I'm just saying, because what 40-year-old man would like to see someone his mother's age, or maybe, a little younger, harassed in such a way?
Well, and I'm glad you brought this up. It's a little bit, you always want to be a little bit hesitant, right? Because to ascribe motives and background, we just don't know. But
touche.
But I mean, I'm with you. I brought it up first. Clearly, if you look at the evidence, let's just look at it sociologically for a second. If you look at the evidence of 40-year-old gay men, right? He's also a homosexual, practicing homosexual, as far as I understand it.
Oh, I didn't know he experienced same-sex attraction.
As far as I understand it, that is the case. And you look at just sociologically, 40-year-old guy experiencing same-sex attraction, very violently, apparently, anti-Christian, anti-life. Personally, I'm not a gambling guy, but if I was, I'd bet the farm that there is a lot of pain, a lot of suffering, a lot of brokenness, like you said. And again, sociologically, we can look at the evidence. And is it possible, theoretically, that Brian Sims does not fall into the category? Yeah, we don't know. We don't know the story, and I haven't researched it. But sociologically, the odds are incredibly good that is, in fact, where he's coming from.
Right. And that's really heartbreaking. My guess might have been, I find from firsthand experience praying in front of the abortion clinic, a lot of the time when the men are angry like this, their hearts are very convicted, and they've usually been involved in something either directly, such as an abortion, or something close to it, that has really led them to have a lot of animosity for anyone who is basically a physical reminder that is convicting and challenging their hearts. And even if it's just a Christianity, it breaks my heart that this man is this way. But at the same time, he is of a younger crop of United States representatives. And I think that there is this theme among some of the younger representatives to just say stuff with absolutely no filter of the millennial representatives, to really kind of cater to their voting base. And unfortunately, these are some of the people who are very, very, very radically pro-abortion, pro same-sex marriage, among other things.
Well, and you do see that, I think, across across the political spectrum is that there is a radicalization where we no longer have to put any sort of filters on. And again, that's on both sides now, because what you're seeing, you see it even in the pro-life movement, right? I mean, maybe more so even in the pro-life movement, where you've got people explicitly saying, well, if the baby is born alive at 40 weeks, can we allow that baby to die? You know, and it's like, oh, I guess we can. We're just going to say it. Yes, and we're going to shout our abortions. And so I think that is a result of too long our politics has been very, shall we say, disingenuous, right? I mean, our politicians have lied, they have shaded everything, they've obfuscated. You know, it's just like they haven't told the truth, and so now we're in a generation where we want authenticity. We don't want any of this stuff, and we're okay with you just spouting all this stuff. And so, you know, I think, I mean, even on the Republican, I mean, we saw this on the Republican side, even the more conservative side. Like, well, we're tired of these vanilla politicians just, you know, saying, so if we want somebody to just speak frankly. You know what? I get that.
You're a vanilla man.
Yeah, right.
You're going to get that label thrown right back at you. You white male Christian America. You know what's happening. But here's another thing here, Don. We have at the same time a lot of the studies of specifically Gen Y and now Gen Z as well. Have you noticed that it is morally acceptable for these, you know, kids, and including myself, to just cuss a lot in the work environment, in front of parents, just day to day?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen this even in TV shows and stuff, and
yes.
It bothers me where you've got the young kid who's like 5 or 6 now or 7, you know, like cussing.
Thank you.
And everybody's like, oh, it's so cute, or this is. I'm like, well, I don't even want my kids on set. I mean, I'm not, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, I feel bad even for the actors involved here.
So here's the deal, Don. What a lot of the studies have shown from Gen Y down, essentially, is that they have been the most advertised to generations. They have seen advertisements. I mean, you can't even have a water bottle without something like thermoflask, hydro flask, you name it. I mean, it's almost overwhelming with all the messages that are being thrown at them. So essentially what they want is they want authenticity. They want things to slice through all the messaging so that they can hear it. And so the studies show, actually, if you cuss a little bit more, you're actually going to be heard better by some of the young people who want to hear what is real.
Huh. Yeah, I mean, I guess that makes sense. You know, the cynicism that comes from being sold something at every step along your journey. And, I mean, at what point, though, does the cussing then just become fake? You know, it's like we're just being cool.
I know. I'm sorry, I can't do it. I won't get more listeners by dropping an F-bomb here and there.
Although I do think, I mean, hopefully, you know, that the authenticity movement, that we want you to just say what you are thinking, you know, and say what you're feeling, and we're just going to go with that. Hopefully that clarifies a few things in the culture. And again, you know, just to go back to what I was saying about the pro-life movement, like, we have had some clarifying within the last couple of years in certain areas, I think, where, you know, for years pro-lifers have been saying, like, ultimately you don't have an argument against infanticide, right? Like, if you're going to be pro-abortion, it's pretty hard to not justify infanticide. And in the last few years, we've really seen, like, pro-infanticide arguments being made in the public square. And you're like, what are you? But at least hopefully that clarifies a few things,
right? And
also more on the pro-life side, like, okay, yes, we do want it to be illegal in this state. Absolutely, we want these, you know, and sometimes that maybe that got, I don't know, people trying to be too nice or whatever. And listen, I think you should be nice, but at least we should clarify the arguments, and I think that's fine.
Don Johnson joining Trending today. If you want to hear more episodes where Don is with me, you can head over to radiotrending.com, go to the host page, and see where this retired host has been on Trending. In the meantime, Don, you have teenage daughters, one which is getting ready to graduate. Congratulations. So I'm sure that you love this theme, or really trend, that Alyssa Milano has set with her hashtag sexstrike. I mean, come on, ladies. This is a great way to avoid having more abortion. So this is her reaction. Georgia has now become one of the handful of states that has the most pro-life laws in the nation. Essentially, once a heartbeat is detected, you cannot abort a child. We have clear scientific evidence that as early as at least 16 days, that child's heart heart can be beating, therefore creating it so that there cannot be abortions after that point. So she is going on a sex strike, trying to wield her power as a woman, saying, ladies, join me. We will not have sex until Georgia changes its laws.
Is this not the best story to come down the wire in a long, long time? First, initially, for her first tweet, right? She says, our reproductive rights are being erased. Until women have legal control over our own bodies, we just cannot risk pregnancy. I thought contraception took care of all that stuff.
Yes, thank you.
Right? What do you mean? Telling people all this time, like that's why you should use contraception, that they don't fail. They're perfect. They're great. We're not risking pregnancy. We don't want to get pregnant. I mean, it's so revelatory, isn't it? It just brings down the whole facade. Like, oh, so what you're saying, when we risked pregnancy and had sex even though we didn't want a baby, now we need abortion. Yeah, exactly. That's what the pro-lifers have been saying all along.
That abortion is the fail-safe for contraception. This is why abortion legal through all 9 months of a woman's pregnancy came about just a couple of years after Griswold versus Connecticut and the decriminalization of using hormonal contraception here. It's just flabbergasting that people make these comments. Now, honestly, I don't think that Alyssa Milano is that serious about this. Unfortunately, I don't know that a lot of these people have enough self-control or habits in order to refrain themselves. But I have to say, Abby Johnson did make me laugh in one of her tweets, saying something along the lines of, I really don't give two thoughts, essentially, to what Alyssa Milano and her tiny bun head have to say. Like, oh my gosh. I'm paraphrasing here.
Abby does not mess around either. No, it's true.
But, and that's, I think, my initial reaction. Everyone's retweeting this and posting it. I'm like, she doesn't mean it. I mean, why are we even paying attention to her? I mean, why?
Well, but this is a good, Abby brought the power to not have sex. Like, women actually have self-control and of the culture, like the whole sexual revolution was predicated on that we do not have, just like animals, to use sort of a crass term for it, but that is how we were treated. Like you're just like an animal, and it's to not have sex whenever your body tells you that you need to have sex. I mean, that's the idea. Like, I grew up on a farm. I know what bulls do that, right? Like, do we really want to treat human beings like that? And that's the degrading aspect. Well, one of the many treats us like animals, that we don't actually have self-control. And so it's ironic, and that many people pointed this out, that it's ironic that Alyssa Milano is actually calling for what pro-life Christian folk controlled in that. Treat yourself like a human, not like an animal. And if you don't want to have a baby...
But here's a key point, Don, that is just the irony of it. And a number of our listeners really reached out on social media saying this, because I said, what do you guys think? And one person really commented, and it's so true. How sad is it that women think the largest amount of power they have to protest against a law is by withholding sex, that they are degrading themselves strictly to their sexual intimacy and sexual power. And then two, that also reminds us, and you and I have talked a lot about this on Trending before, is that ultimately women are the gatekeepers of what does and doesn't go with sexual morality within a relationship. And if we're game, we're going to have sex outside of marriage. If we're not game, there's going to be pressure in order to uphold the sanctity of sexual intimacy for when you're ready to have a child and start a family.
Yeah, two things on that. On one hand, I get the comment about not reducing a woman's power to sex, and of course, that's correct. But your second comment, I think, actually should be emphasized a little bit more there, Timmerie, is that women do have the power in the sense of being gatekeepers. Like, traditionally, as a woman, you, along with all of your fellow women cohorts in your community, did have the power to dictate the way I hold a job and was willing to raise my kids, and so would all the other women in the community. And this had a very powerful effect on the rest of the culture. Sort of, and obstacle is not the right word, but when women abdicate that power, revolution, when women said, oh, okay, well, actually, we'll take contraception, we'll have sex whenever the man wants to have sex. And you look at the campus culture now, the hookup culture on campus, have sex, but they go along with it always just to be polite. Like, not only have they now you have thousands and millions of women around the country give along just to be polite. Like, well, I don't know, man wants to. It's, we talked about this in my goal of sex in our culture. And so Alyssa really said, no, we're not going to have sex whenever you want,
And how great is this? Sex is about making babies and uniting spouses. Let's get back to that. And that means that monogamy is important. Fidelity, right? Like the fidelity is so fundamental. The right of a child to a mother and a father, you taking on that responsibility and being transformed by being a parent, right? Like these are all great things that build up society and transform us to be better people.
Yeah. Another way to look at that, I think, Timmerie, is as a matter of justice. And I know justice on one side doesn't, but really what we're after is justice for all people, justice for the woman in the relationship. And I think there isn't any justice, certainly for the baby of an abortion or for the kids of a relationship that doesn't have culture is set up right now. Like what Alyssa Milano has traditionally advocated for before she,
Babies, you mean? She realized sex actually makes babies?
What?
I mean, what? This is actually a lesson. Ironically, I can't tell you how often in the counseling room working within the crisis pregnancy centers, the counselors would come out and just be astonished yet again that, these women would say, it's impossible. I can't be pregnant. There's no way. And there's that question, well, did you do it? Did you have sex? Well, yeah, but I remember Jennifer Roback Morris once said that a lot of university students have told her, well, smart sex doesn't make babies, something along those lines. We think we're so evolved now. We know better than that. Good grief. Dawn, I was actually just talking to someone the other day and they were asking me for great documentaries. And I said, well, I personally do not like documentaries that much, but my dear friend Don Johnson made a very intriguing and enlightening and entertaining documentary with Unprotected. Where can people find it right now?
At Amazon Prime. It's for free, available for you on there. You can also go to you can find it on my page if you prefer things like Vimeo. We have all sorts of ways, all of those ways right there.
So coming up, we're going to be talking about Don Johnson and his love story of how he met his wife. So many of you have been writing in, asking me in person, look, I'm trying to meet someone. This has been a great challenge. And so I've been inviting some of my dearest and favorite people to come on and share their stories about how they met their spouse. I think there's something to stories and the way it was done 5 years ago, 10, 20 years ago, however long ago it was, that reminds our generation, and I'm talking specifically to Gen Y and down, that we have become socially inadequate in how we interact because social media, texting has made it so that we don't know how to interact face to face. There's so many nerves and social disorders going on, and we're all guilty of it. So coming up, Don Johnson will be with me as we are talking about that and much more.
Timmerie will be right back. Send her a tweet at Timmerie. That's Timmerie. You're listening to Trending with Timmerie, where morality and culture meet, offering an eternal perspective on today's hottest topics.
It's great to be back. I am excited this summer to be heading on the road. I will be everywhere from Indiana, Notre Dame, to Michigan, to South Carolina, Los Angeles, San Diego. So if you are in especially San Diego area or LA, there are two big conferences I want to invite you to. Vox Vitae, you can find more at voxvitae.org. We have guests coming such as Matt Walsh, Father Frank Pavone, Pam Stenzel, Doug Barry, a great lineup for both youth and adults. So check that out. It's at the end of June. And then this July in San Diego is the Couples for Christ Youth Conference taking place that second weekend of July. Come on out for the weekend. Matt Frad will be there and myself hosting some of the key sessions. So please join us. I've posted a link so you can head over to radiotrending.com to get connected with me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.
You're listening to Trending with Timmerie, where morality and culture meet, offering an eternal perspective on today's hottest topics.
Don't go away. You won't want to miss this. A little later in the show, Don Johnson, my former co-host, is with me, and he's going to share a little bit about how he met his wife. In the meantime, after leaving the radio studio last week, it was absolutely heartbreaking to learn about the shooting that took place in Denver. Actually, I don't know if everyone knows this, but just a few miles, actually, I think it was 7 miles away from the 1999 Columbine high school massacre. that took place just 20 years ago. Here we now see another shooting, and there are some heroes in this story, Don.
Yeah, there really is. I mean, it's interesting how, you talk about 20 years, and in one sense, I guess I'm older, and now 20 years, and in one sense, it's become commonplace. I think this was of shootings of this kind, and that's just, I mean, it's only
high school.
It's only May. I don't know. I want to be careful what I say there. I know. I saw the numbers of. I think it involves youth at least, but a lot of shootings this year, and that it seems like, I saw another story on this, that it seems like it's becoming so common now that the way kids are reacting to it is different. And so that now you actually see a lot more, the last few shootings, in fact, you've seen these heroes not running to hide because they're in cover and lock the door and hope for the best. That hasn't worked out, and people know that hasn't worked out. And the people with the guns and sacrificing their lives in many ways, as happened with this. So, it's sad. It's heroic.
And I have to say, there's such a pressure having to do with debate over gun laws. It's sad that some of these stories aren't coming up, because there's one story I remember about 6 to 8 months ago where the shooter didn't end up shooting anyone. There was someone who was I think a volunteer coach or someone who, as soon as he heard that there was an active shooter, came darting across campus and essentially eliminated the target. I'm not sure if he killed him. I'm not sure if he interceded. I can't remember the story, but it didn't hit the media. I remember reading about it weeks later, and it's sad that we're not able to talk about these heroes like this 18-year-old boy, Kendrick Castillo, who him and 2 others charged the shooter and took him down. And here's what's interesting. Only one man died, and it was Kendrick Castillo, who is a hero for immediately bulldozing down the shooter, and he's the only one who actually lost his life thus far. Now, what's interesting, Don, is that I was reading articles about this, and over again, it says, 3 students attempted to take down the shooter. I'm sorry, but they did, and they saved the lives of so many people that day.
Yeah, that's what has to happen, but that has to happen, right?
That conversation.
Yeah, that conversation has to happen, and it's spoken through a filter where all the different elements. And this one is particularly because, if I'm not mistaken, one of the shooters was transgender.
This is what's sad. Yeah. Actually, both of the shooters, both
Maya
and Devon, were identifying as transgender. Maya, 16, so there are not a lot of images out there about her because the court ordered that no images be shared. But Maya, 16, she was identifying as a boy, and then Devon is 18, so you're seeing a little bit more about him. But what's sad is that, Dawn, these 2 kids' classmates have been coming out commenting about what a disservice has been done to Maya and Devon, how there are clearly mental health issues going on. And these are from the words of their fellow classmates, saying people were not giving them the adequate help that they needed. And it's interesting because the fellow students don't say, they weren't affirming them enough or they weren't doing this enough. They were saying they were not giving them the adequate help that they needed.
Yeah, and this gets to, hopefully, it's going to take this anymore, that we have to deny the obvious, right? We have to tiptoe around some of these things. Clearly, health issues. And I suspect, in fact, I know this, that there would have been a lot of that you would be called transphobic, or that you would be called, you can't call it a mental health issue, right? In fact, I was just reading an article before we came on the show. It was just where a court has actually brought up charges against the parent of a youth for the parent not using the right pronoun. Court has stepped in because the dad's like, listen, I have a daughter and I'm not going to call her my son. So that's how it's going to go. And the court stepped in and said, no, you have to. And so it's just such death consequences, right? Because envision a place where we were a little more sane, where these 2 kids actually got some help. Right. A lot of those issues now have become so polarized, so politicized, so all of that now Kendrick Castillo has given his life ultimately for a false ideology. He'll have rewards in heaven. God bless him. Sacrificed. Well, greater love has this than you sacrifice your love.
Right, absolutely. That's Don Johnson on Trending with Timmerie. There's so many elements to this story. You know, it broke my heart. My mom sent the article over to me of specifically Devon Erickson as he's there with his long hair. You know, it's dyed different colors at the top, and he has his nail polish on. And the court is reading to him, you know, you can't be in contact with the other shooter. You can't do this. You know, he's kind of giving him guidelines for his imprisonment. And it was absolutely astonishing hearing this and watching as he completely acquiesced and nodded, like he knew, he understood, he deserved this. It was just so heartbreaking that here's a young boy who's clearly suffering. And, you know, to hear so many of his classmates speaking up, one of the classmates actually posted on social media saying it's not that these two people, Maya and Devon, are hateful toward other people. It's that they have a lot of hatred within themselves. And this is where it gets really scary, Dawn, because we were just talking last week on the show. If you didn't catch the episode, you need to go back and listen to it. It's titled LGBTQ and so forth. But how girls in the UK are uncomfortable because they're being pressured, if they're not gay or transgender, to make sure they come out as cisgender and to make sure they approve everything that is transgender, or else these 13-year-old girls are terrified of coming out as transphobic. I mean, what sort of pressure are we putting on kids today? At some point, we have to see this is really harming children.
Oh, it's devastating. It's devastating, and it harms on so many levels. I mean, we talked about Alyssa Milano's, sex strike last segment. And what's interesting, if you go and look at, and I don't know how Twitter sort of shows the comments, but I briefly looked at Milano's first tweet. Oh, no, it was her tweet about protecting. She said, "Women, we have to protect our vaginas." I think this was a stand strong, ladies. And then one of the first commenters, at least one of the first ones I said, actually, Alyssa, you don't have to have a vagina to be aided wrongly. And of course, Alyssa, responded. She said,
"Oh my gosh, you're right."
Oh yeah. Oh no, I'm sorry. You're right. I shouldn't have said that. It just makes you like, man, we live in a time where it's like a fog, there's scales on people's eyes. The emperor has no clothes, ladies and gentlemen. Stop saying that he does. It's
right.
like,
isn't that such a relevant? What was a story for us as children is now coming true, and we can easily be poisoned to become relative as well in our thinking if we do not, read from other centuries, look at moral truths, turn to God for absolute truth as the creator of the world. We're going to lose ourselves if we do not cling on to resources and people who are speaking truth and light and life into the world.
I'm glad you brought that up, Timmerie. You talked about reading old stuff. Like in the past few years, as I've worked on these documentaries and gotten more into reading history, and I guess I've been reading history for a long time, it's really become apparent to me that the loss of understanding of where we came from is hugely zero concept of any context for anything that is happening, right? I mean, we just live in the moment so that the news cycle lasts about 5 seconds, and even if it's a really important story, by tomorrow nobody's going to remember it, and your social media feed is constant. I mean, we not only need to, understand the last 100 years, we need to understand the last 4,000 years of our history.
Absolutely.
To put this current cultural moment in context and to see just how insane it is that we're trying to get through. You're right. I just thought that was a good point here. I just want to hammer that home. Yes, let's learn some history, people.
Well, and this is why we put the tagline together for the show, which I don't say it enough. I really don't say it at all. It's just on the website. It's trending conversation with timeless principles, because the reality is that there are tough, trending topics that are confronting us, and it's like a truck coming straight at you, and you can either be bulldozed over and lose your soul in the culture today, or you can stand for timeless principles, get a little egg on your face, but say, "Lord, I love you, and I'm going to show other people what it means to be authentically happy, grounded in you." Coming up on Trending, Don Johnson is going to be with me sharing his love story and how he met his wife, Kendra.
Timmerie will be right back. Send her a tweet at Timmerie. That's Timmerie. You're listening to Trending with Timmerie.
What all of you have been waiting for. I know you guys love those juicy details when you get them, few and far between, sometimes on Trending, of how our dear Don Johnson met his wife. So tell us, Don.
This is a cool segment. I didn't realize this was a segment. I saw it on the topic list. I'm like, sure, that's a good story. I can tell that. So I met lovely Kendra. I was in my probably mid-20s, I'm trying to think. We got married when I was 27. And I was working for an organization called City Team Ministries in the Bay Area of California. And we worked with underprivileged kids. And my specialty was working at a camp. So I would do like youth group, youth after school stuff, coached a roller hockey team, that kind of thing during the year. And then at camp, we took them out to the Santa Cruz Mountains, and for 9 or 10 weeks, we'd work with kids out at camp. And one year, I want to say around 94, maybe 95, something like that, probably 94. One of the girls that came to camp as a lifeguard and counselor was lovely Kendra. And she was, she's a bit younger than I am. And so at first I'm like, oh, that seems nice, cute girl. I wasn't necessarily looking for anyone, but I do remember the first time I sort of noticed her. And it wasn't like the stereotypical guy thing where you're like, oh, she's at the pool or whatever, looking good. She looked fine. Don't get me wrong. She was awesome. But
I know you pulled one of those "help me, I'm drowning" moments.
Yeah,
there.
exactly. I'm like,
a Sandlot moment, mouth to mouth.
Somehow I'm at the pool a lot this summer. I don't know how that happened. But I actually, I don't know why this sticks in my mind, but it always has. And I don't think I even knew her name probably at the time, but she was out on the basketball court and she was working with all of the little kids, and I was just struck by how kind and compassionate and how awesome she was with the kids. Like she just obviously cared a lot and was very fun loving and wasn't standoffish, and I think that's like just a really cool personality, I thought, with the kids. And that has always struck me. And I don't know how much you make of these stories like teaching moments, but I just think and I assume this is true of a lot of people, but I don't know. That was always really, really attractive to me, still is, frankly, in people, is like, how are you with children? Are you kind? Are you compassionate? Are you willing to give of yourself for them? And that just struck me originally as like super attractive. And now, she was physically cute, don't get me wrong, but I remember that being the first like, she seems like a really cool person.
A good person. And isn't this what appeals to what, especially I think young men are actually outright saying they're tuning out of dating today. They've given up. Women are not what they should be. They're not being themselves. They don't have virtue and expectations. They only want to work. They don't care about marriage and raising families. And so the guys are saying, I'm opting out. I'm done dating. Yet what they're looking for is exactly what you are saying you found. Someone who loved children, who was good with them. And notice, I want everyone to listen to this. You guys met in volunteering and giving your time as well.
Again, this is huge. I agree with that completely, Timmerie. Like, I wasn't looking for someone, but if you want to meet someone who's like-minded and has a capacity to give of themselves, like who can love, right? that's what love is. Yeah, like volunteer opportunities, mission trips, that sort of thing is crucial, I think. A great way to meet someone who's potentially a good life mate.
And I also think God blesses you and your friendships. My greatest friendships have been with the people who have been in this true war over the issue of abortion. And they're willing to sacrifice themselves, their time, their finances in order to serve. And it has always struck me that those are the deepest relationships I have been able to develop over the years, because these are people who are like-minded, like you said, who are willing to give of themselves. And those are things you want to see in someone who you might marry.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I think, just to push down the story a little bit. So we didn't date that summer. That wasn't something we did at camp. And as attracted as I was to her, I just didn't think that was in the cards. I didn't see she lived in Oregon and she was going back to Oregon and I was in the Bay Area set, and it was all fine. And but I do remember one more story that I at least want to share, and we can do as many stories as you want. But so after camp that summer, I was on my way off the campground, and actually I was on my way to drive back to Canada for a short time. I lived in the Bay Area, but I was making a quick trip at the end of the summer to go see my parents and do some stuff. And I was on my way out of the driveway when the camp director stepped out of the door and waved me down. And a friend of mine, so I stopped, said hi. She's like, "Hey, Kendra needs a ride down to my aunt's house, right? She needs it down over the hill into San Jose." And so I'm like, yeah, absolutely, no problem. I can drop her there on the way. And so she got in the car, and I took her down and dropped off, and we chatted, and we'd been friends, again, all summer, but it just I wasn't in that space where this can be anything romantic right now. So that was what it was. But we chatted and had a nice talk over the hill. And I dropped her off, and I said, I'm going up to Canada, but I'm coming back down. What's your plan? She's like, I'm going home to Oregon, and then I'm going to start at Oregon State University in just a few weeks. I'm like, okay, that's cool. Well, hey, I'm coming back through Oregon. Maybe I could stop and say hi on my way back down. She's like, yeah, that'd be great. Why don't we do that? So that's what I did. I went home. I did my stuff. I'm driving back to Oregon, and I got through Oregon, and it was late. It was like 8:30 at night. It was getting late, and I still had a long ways to go, but I'm like, I don't want to make it seem to the girl. Again, I'm not really thinking dating. I'm just like, I don't want her to think that I blew her off. Like, I'm a nice guy, and I don't want her to think I was lying to her or whatever. I legitimately want to try to reach out to her. So this was before, pre-cell phones. I stop at a payphone by the side of the road. I find her number. I'm like, hey, I'm sorry. I'm actually going through Eugene tonight, probably about 9 or 10. So I know it's a little late, but if you wanted to, I'm glad to stop and have coffee or something, but I understand if it's like, she said, no, stop. That'd be fine. No problem. So later on, I realized, her parents weren't too thrilled about having some guy stop at like 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock at night, in Eugene. But anyway.
It's good, babe. Come on.
Yeah. So, but I did stop, and we went out to coffee. Went to Dutch Brothers Coffee. Or no, we didn't. We went to Allen Brothers Coffee downtown in Eugene and had a wonderful time. And dropped her off, and I actually kept going that night. It wasn't like I was staying there. I was driving all night. I was young and foolish, Timmerie. But I had said, we had got
this at home.
we had got talking just about life in general, and she was just like, I'm supposed to go to Oregon State, but I don't really feel like it, especially after the summer she had serving, and kind of a life-changing summer for her. And I said, well, this little Bible school that I go to in San Jose, maybe you should try that, because it's pretty small. It's pretty easy to get into. And this was literally Friday, and I'm starting school like Tuesday. Okay, this is the time frame. And she's like, oh, okay, that sounds interesting. I'm thinking nothing of it. So I take off. Well, I didn't hear anything. Guess who shows up on campus Monday morning, Timmerie? At my school. Yes. Kendra.
Like it's meant to be, Lord.
It was she talked to her dad, and her dad actually wasn't thrilled with her going to Oregon State either. And he's like, you know what? If you want to go to a Christian school, I will set that up. And they made some calls over the weekend, and it was back in the day where it's a lot easier than it is today. They got it all set up. She got on a bus and was there by Monday.
Wow.
And so, yeah, it was. I just think I love the way God works. I wasn't necessarily looking in that direction, although I was certainly open to it. But I just think back, like, God, little steps along the way, like, had me stop in that driveway, and take her over the hill and had me connect with her on the way. And so it was during that following year at school then that we did start dating, and we were married within a year after that. Frankly, it all happened sort of quickish, I guess, after that. But yeah, it was, I think, just being open, I guess, would be my point there, being open to God's leading and just being willing to take a step when you need to take a step, that sort of thing.
I have a couple questions for you, but first of all, I'm just curious if I know that she has such a heart for our Lord and service, but was she following you a little bit to California? Was that part of it as well?
Well, yeah, kind of.
Okay. But I only ask that because sometimes women are so stubborn and they don't want to give, a little. Sure. And I think that it's a good lesson. Like, she actually really liked you. And although she was going for other reasons, this was definitely a determining factor. I want to throw out at you this. There's a lot of kind of animosity sometimes toward either long distance dating. Oh, I'm not even going to ask her out even though I like her because she's going to be moving soon or lives somewhere else. Or animosity toward being introduced to someone via online dating. It doesn't have to be online dating. It's an online introduction. And I think sometimes we need to simplify it. Yet your story is a great story of something that started out very long distance and possibly no hope for ending up in the same state even.
Yeah, no, absolutely. All of those things should be on the table. I mean, why not, right? I do, though, want to add to it that, like you said, Kendra was willing to move. We've been willing to move for each other through our whole, we've lived in a lot of places. And a lot of times I have said, you know what, I'd like to get my master's degree. And she's like, yeah, let's go, and so we'd move. Then she's like, well, hey, we have this opportunity, and I'm like, yeah, let's go. I mean, there has to be a willingness to give and take, to give of yourself and say, I'm willing to sacrifice for the relationship and for that other person. If both people have that willingness, I mean, you're going to be able to overcome, but it can't be like, well, I've got my stuff and I'm not going to change, so you're out. I mean, that's not going to get you anywhere.
That's Don Johnson. You can find more of him at donjohnsonministries.org or head over to Radio Trending. Don't miss an episode. RadioTrending.com, learning more about our guests. And if you like the show, be sure to send it with a friend or family member who might benefit.
This has been Trending with Timmerie. To book her to speak or learn more about her guest, visit RadioTrending.com. That's RadioTrending.com. You can listen to more of Trending via the podcast on iTunes, Google Play, or the iHeartRadio app, where you can share your favorite episodes.